Oh, hi. You're on with your local BCBA, Chelsea, and I'm here to teach you how to do great ABA for your everyday life. Today, I want to talk to you about a very basic principle in ABA, and I think I call this one how to figure out the why your kid is acting that way. Several times a day, I get asked from professionals, from therapists, from parents, my kid is doing this, that, the other. They explain the behavior to me, and then they say, what do I do about it? And I always think or say, well, why? Why is your kid doing whatever? And when I say why in this video, what I'm referring to is what is the function of that behavior. Now, sounds very simple. However, a lot of people get this wrong. So, I'm going to teach you today a few simple ways to identify the why or the function of your child's behavior. It may be a kiddo you work with, it may be your own kiddo, but figuring out the function of their behavior or the why to their behavior is a key to figuring out what to do about it. How do you change it? How do you get them to stop doing it? How do you get them to do the more appropriate thing? So, I was thinking about this morning and I came up with a formula. I hope it's not backwards, but behavior plus the immediate change around you equals the why or the function of that behavior. Now, it's as simple as that. The behavior, so you say you have a tantrum or a meltdown or non-compliance or, or not complying, I guess, or whatever it is. And then you add to that the immediate change in the environment. The only time it's not going to be the immediate change in the environment is when you're thinking about, okay, it's a sensory behavior, so I didn't see a change in the outside environment, but nonetheless, there was still an immediate change to occur. It was just inside, internally in that person. And then those two things together equals the why or the function of that behavior. So a lot of times, I'll have a parent and they'll say, hey, my kid is having a meltdown. Every single time I, do this or that, and they just have a meltdown and they do this and they scream and they kick and they throw things. And I will say, hey, hold on, okay, tell me about the behavior. And usually what I get is, well, I will set the timer and tell him, hey, we're going to have to do homework, and he knows it every single day. And then, set the homework up. And then he has this huge behavior. A lot of times this is where the conversation ends. The most important thing has been left out. What's been left out is the consequence, is what happens right after that tantrum behavior. This is the most important thing. I've made a bit of a diagram. And so the first part is called antecedent. This is our ABC data, which I call the A. And this is, you tell the kiddo it's time to do your homework, you present the homework task, or you say whatever the SD is. The second part is behavior, the B, the behavior. Whatever the kid does, the tantrum, the meltdown, the yelling, kicking, screaming, whatever. And then the third part is what happens right after. What is the change in the environment? This is the C. So we have our A, antecedent, B, behavior, C, consequence, the consequence. You might redirect the child, you might reprimand the child, you might tell him what he's not going to get, you might follow through. There is, a lot of different consequences or a lot of different things that can happen right after behavior. A lot of times I have seen parents, I have seen professionals try to assess the function of the behavior based on the antecedent. I'm going to put this down for a second. So when I talk about the function of the behavior, I'm talking about the very traditional functions, which there are only 4. I think making it so simple is the best thing to do. Otherwise, we have to worry about, well, is it because the kid is angry, or is it because they're feeling sad, or that sort of thing, which, as a behaviorist, what we're concerned about is the 4 different functions, which is to gain access to something, not only a tangible, but to something. It might be an activity, to get attention. So we have access, attention, to escape, get out of something that they don't like or don't want. And then we have sensory. The sensory, the automatic reinforce, is the most challenging to deal with. And sometimes it's challenging to see it because there's not an outward change in the environment. There's an internal change in that person's state of being. However, all of these functions that are served, attention, access, escape, and sensory, are immediately reinforced right after the behavior happens. So they get access or the promise to access, they get escape or the promise of escape, they get attention, or they get that sensory input or kind of output, relief, right when the behavior happens. So if we're going to say there's only 4 functions, I think that makes it much more simple for us to actually deal with it. So I'm going to go back to our chart, and I'm going to tell you that we have our A, we have our B, we have our C. So anytime a behavior happens, a behaviorist is going to say, tell me about it. And these are the things that we're analyzing in their head as you tell us the story, as a therapist tells us the scenario, as a parent recounts what happened. Now, to figure out what the function is, this is what I always do. I always say, this is what the function is. A lot of people don't feel comfortable with this. Let me explain it. So you have your kiddo. You say, Johnny, it's time for us to do homework. Every day at 6 o'clock we do homework. And what does Johnny do? Johnny bites you, and he yells and screams, and he throws his books all over the room. And you sit there because you know he's going to do this, and you have another book for him, and you just keep going at it. And maybe Johnny's 4 years old, and so you kind of physically prompt him through it. A lot of people will say, well, he's doing it to escape. Yep, that's why he's doing it. So what they do is they actually identify the A, the antecedent, a task was presented, and they say, well, he must be acting out because he expects to escape. This is what I always say. I say, well, when he acts out, do you allow him to escape? Oh, no, I follow through. I keep presenting the task. I'm right there in his face. I hand over hand. I have him to do it. Well, let me tell you, unless over here is some variation of allow to escape, escape is not the function that's maintaining that behavior. Now let's look at what actually happens in that scenario. I give a reprimand. I continually give him this input. I'm standing over him, hand over hand. I'm giving him all of these extra instructions. What are you actually doing? You're actually giving him, in his environment, what's changing is your attention towards him. A lot of people have a hard time realizing that escape is not the maintaining function of this behavior. Attention is. So that's the lesson for today. We'll do our A, we'll do our B, we'll do our C. But to figure out the function of the behavior, we're only looking at what in the environment changes immediately in response to that behavior. In response, I mean by saying that if Johnny was doing his homework appropriately, would you be giving him all of this extra physical input, all of this extra verbal input, all of this extra attention? No. So the fact that he continuously has the outburst, has a tantrum, means that somewhere within him, even if it's subconsciously, he knows that contingency. He knows he acts out. You give him all of this input. When he acts out in response to homework, he's expecting you to give him what you always give him. You think it's follow through, you think it's effective, but if the behavior continues or even increases, you're actually reinforcing it, meaning that you are giving the behavior what it expects. So our 4 functions again: attention, access, escape, and sensory. Now, the why is so important because until you know the why, you cannot say, what are we going to do to fix Johnny's tantrums during behavior? If you think that Johnny's tantrums are escape function, then you're going to follow through even more. You're going to lock him in a room with only you. And you know what? You're going to give him all that much more attention. He's probably going to escalate or increase in that behavior. So you have to be so accurate about the consequence and what function is that behavior serving. And then once you identify that, you accurately identify the function, then you can create the alternative. So then you can say, he's actually doing this because attention is constantly happening when he does it. How can I give him attention for appropriate behavior and withhold it for the inappropriate behavior? And sometimes it will feel really weird and it will feel like a contradiction to what you should do when Johnny has a fit about doing homework and you just stand back and say, I'm going to wait. And you actually withhold what was the serving or the maintaining function. When you do this, this is what we call extinction. This means that instead of fueling the behavior with the function that it's expecting or wanting, you're actually withholding that fuel, and that behavior, like a fire, is going to go down. And then what you do as a good behaviorist, you actually figure out, how can I give him what he's wanting, which is the attention, for appropriate behavior. You might say, well, Johnny, you know what? You're going to do your homework, and every 10 minutes that you're on task and you're doing really well, I am going to come and see it with you, or I'm going to do an extra project with you and do something that's going to involve a lot of attention. So this is just a very quick example of how to identify the why.